Good morning from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. 4 days before its deadline, the Congressional Supercommittee on Reducing America's Debt remains at an impasse. Democrats yesterday openly ridiculed the latest proposals from Republicans. And the New York Times reports today that unreleased census figures show that 100 million Americans, that is 1 in 3 of us, live below or only just above the poverty line. Right now, I'm joined by my panel, James Polis, columnist for thedailycaller.com, who has also written for The American Conservative, Michelle Goldberg, senior contributing writer to Newsweek and The Daily Beast, from GritTV.org, Laura Flanders, co-author and editor of At the Tea Party, and Ray Lewis, retired Philadelphia police captain, who was arrested at Occupy Wall Street on the National Day of Action on Thursday. And for those tuning in for the one and only Melissa Harris Perry, do not worry, she will be joining us in just a bit. All right, if the first 2 months of Occupy Wall Street featured the Rebel Alliance making surprising gains, I think it's fair to say this past week was when the empire struck back. On Tuesday, Mayor Bloomberg ordered police in riot gear to clear the occupiers out of Zuccotti Park in an early morning raid. Police destroyed the occupiers' personal belongings, including 5,500 or so books in the People's Library on site. One city councilman, Ydanis Rodriguez, was thrown to the ground, beaten, and arrested at the scene. Mayor Bloomberg and police made sure it was all done away from the prying eyes of the press, who were blocked from Zuccotti Park, supposedly for their own safety, according to the city. Then on Thursday, protesters organized a day of action to mark the 2-month anniversary of the Occupy movement, a protest known on Twitter as #N17. 1,000 protesters gathered near New York Stock Exchange in an almost entirely nonviolent demonstration. There were, however, a few exceptions. 7 officers and 10 protesters were injured, according to police. Thursday night, thousands marched over the Brooklyn Bridge in a peaceful protest, and I was there. I'll talk more about that later. Also Thursday, there were protests and arrests in Los Angeles, St. Louis, Portland, Oregon, and other cities around the country. More than 300 arrested Thursday, 252 in New York City alone. Captain Lewis, you were arrested, charged with disorderly conduct, including disrupting traffic and refusing to move on. There was an image of you being arrested in your dress blues down in front of the New York Stock Exchange that went kind of viral, and we were all in the office sort of marveling at it. There's some footage of you being arrested. Why did you're a retired police captain, you're served in Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken, right? Mm-hmm. Why did you come down to Occupy Wall Street on Thursday?
Well, I didn't come down on Thursday. I actually came down on Monday. And I came down to assist the movement because, to me, I've been retired for 8 years in a very secluded life. I moved up to New York, Catskill Mountains, and you can't see anybody, nobody can see me, and it was a Walden Pond type of lifestyle, which I wanted. But I also use the internet for my only source of information, not the TV, not the newspapers, and I saw this action being taken by these protesters and the conditions they were living in, and the fact that they were not doing this for themselves, they were doing this for all people who were suffering injustice. And that conviction that they had for social justice just inspired me, and I couldn't do anything else but come down. And I would have been down sooner, but I was working on a very important project in upstate New York against the gas companies. The term is fracking, where they go down and they destroy the earth.
You're involved in fracking activism upstate. So you came down this week. Will you tell me about the arrest itself? And I guess the question I'm sort of dying to know is what your interactions with your NYPD was like. Presumably it was a little different than if I had been down there arrested or someone else. Obviously you were dressed like this. What was that interaction like?
They were it was exemplary of professional conduct with me and every protester that I witnessed.
Interesting.
They had an extremely tough job. They're human beings too, okay? And there's the fight or flight reaction.
Interesting.
Police cannot have the flight reaction, so they have to have the fight. And subsequently, this can get out of hand. And that's why you have the white shirts. The white shirts are the ones who are supervising. What I saw down there was the white shirts doing fighting. Therefore, who's supervising?
Right.
That's when you have anarchy. And The problem, and I also want to make clear to everyone in the New York Police Department that my statements, video was edited, okay? And I knew that was going to happen. And the one step I could take to try to minimize that from happening was to refuse any interviews with Fox News. And a Fox representative did come up to me. I saw the Fox. I said, "You stay away from me. You're a big part of the problem." But go ahead, continue. I'm a little wordy. If I get too wordy.
No, you're not wordy. You're perfect. I mean, this is really fascinating stuff because I think all of us have been, I'll speak for myself, I've been watching this unfold. And, you know, in the beginning, I think I've been surprised by some of the police overreaction. And people on the internet have said, you're naive to be surprised by police overreaction. But I think there's part of me that feels that, A, I'm worried about confrontations with police becoming the sort of signpost for the movement as opposed to its content about the 99% message. At the same time, I have been really upset by the various police overreactions we've seen across the country, and it seems consistent. I mean, you have seen time and time again non-threatening, non-violent, peaceful protesters being the subject of force, batons, pepper spray. I want to play this video, which is sort of making the rounds this morning now. This is students at UC California, Davis, sitting down completely peacefully, linked arms, protesting tuition hikes, and this is what happens to them. Person who emailed that to me this morning said it looks like someone spraying cockroaches. That was pepper spray. What is your reaction when you see a video like that?
My reaction is corporate America is using their own police department as hired thugs, and that's a disgrace. And I also want to explain, I have to get a few things in here on my own.
Please.
I was holding a sign that said, NYPD, do not be Wall Street mercenaries. It was misinterpreted. Okay, what I found out, and they'll never see that sign again for this reason. I was trying to convey the message, do not become Wall Street mercenaries. But just that one word, do not be, instead of become, it was like I was alluding to the fact that they already are mercenaries. And that, I didn't realize that until I was told.
And did you get a lot of backlash to that?
No, but I got one person that told me that, and then a light bulb went on my head, and I said, you know what, he's absolutely right. I was inferring that they're mercenaries now, and that is not the case. So I apologize to every NYPD officer out there if you interpreted it the wrong way.
But you seem to have this very conflicted stance on what is happening between the protesters and police, and I understand that given your unique positionality, which is why we invited you on the program. You are both a protester and a retired police officer. I don't think there's a whole lot of people in that part of the Venn diagram as of yet. In Wisconsin, when we saw in Wisconsin, when there was the move to destroy collective bargaining by Governor Scott Walker, we saw police standing in solidarity with protesters, and it was a very powerful image. And I don't think we're seeing a lot of that so far. I want you to go back to this psychology of fight or flight. Describe to me what is in your head as a police officer as you stand there facing people linked arms or sort of confronting you in a nonviolent way. What is the psychology of that moment like?
Okay. You are being confronted oftentimes in a nonviolent way, but sometimes there's more violence coming from the demonstrators than you see. All right, and there's a tremendous amount of hostility being thrown your way, disparaging remarks against your mother, your parents, everything like that, being spit upon, and you have to just stand there and take a lot of that. We're all human, okay? Cops are just as human as everybody else. And some of them are going to lose their temper. Everybody has lost their temper. And that is the reason you have to have supervision. And that's why the white shirts cannot get involved in fighting, because then it's anarchy. There's nobody supervising them.
Their role in the hierarchy is to be the check on that moment when you lose your people.
Exactly.
And that is not what we've seen.
Exactly.
Laura,
it's so important. You have said so many important things, and thank you so much for being here. First, I want to just remind you and all of us where where you started, which was you were drawn to this movement because of the values it was expressing.
Right.
And I think that what's been so critical about this week is that we've had an effort to shift the profile of what this movement is about. You can change any picture, and maybe you can't change the Occupy movement, but you can certainly change the picture by pouring enormous amounts of cops into every television frame.
Right.
And that's what happened this week. But what's motivating people to come to this movement is not that it's a police versus the people conflict. It is because of the values that are being represented here, which I think really were expressed this week as the 99% for the 100%. And then the other thing that you talked about that I think is just a little fact is with this question of mercenaries, there was some important reporting over the last few weeks about how, in fact, I think Pam Martins wrote about it for Counterpunch, you have got a Giuliani program. Mayor Giuliani started a program years back called Plan Detail, which it emerges, you know, Wall Street can hire NYPD. Don't pay the benefits, don't pay the pensions. So you weren't entirely wrong, although you're completely right that your words were vulnerable to editing. We saw that this week.
Michelle, you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I mean, you said earlier that you don't want this to become a police versus protester story. But at the same time, one of the things that's been so interesting about this is that the police have actually played such a kind of important catalytic role in this movement since day one. I mean, a lot of people dismissed it early on in September. You know, it's just a bunch of the same kind of the anarchists, usual suspects in the park. Then there was that really horrible image of a police officer pepper spraying this woman in the face. Suddenly it got a lot bigger. There was a big march over the Brooklyn Bridge in October, 700 people arrested. Then it really took off. I thought that the movement was really dwindling. You know, Zuccotti Park was becoming increasingly kind of sordid and sketchy. Then they cracked down with such extreme force. And all of a sudden, again, it's reinvigorated. They have their biggest march ever.
Well, but wait. We don't want the movement. I don't think, if I'm coming from where you're coming from, to gain in public view based on the number of arrests that are made, right? I don't think there's any surprise that the captain feels some ambivalence about the movement. I don't think you have to be a captain to feel that ambivalence. Sure. Given that there is this real tension when it comes to the rule of law breaking down on both sides, where you've got sort of the jackasses versus jackboots. And both sides taunting the other. It's not going to be good. And I really have to ask you, my question is, what are the values? You talk about the values that are being expressed. It's not clear to me that there's any consistency of values that are being expressed.
Laura, I'm going to have you answer that question.
No fighting here.
Laura, I'm going to have you answer that question after the break. Right. Ray Lewis, I'm going to thank you so much for coming in. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to have you on this morning. We will be back. We're going to talk about the values driving the 99%, and Melissa Harris Perry will join us after the break.